Let's open with the word of prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this evening and for everyone who is gathered here, either in person or online. And we ask that in our time together, your Holy Spirit would work within us, that we might come to a deeper relationship with you and with one another. For we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to start with an explanation about what exactly it is that we're going to do in this study. And the way I'm going to introduce that is I'm going to show you this picture. So this is a picture of Luther College before the expansion, okay, taken from the air. And, oh, I didn't mention this yesterday. Do you know who was flying the plane? Mark Jerry, the current president of Luther College, who is a pilot. I don't know if he's let go of his pilot's license or not, but anyways, he was a pilot. And when he was interning in Earl Grey, he took me up one day when I got my new camera, and we went around. I got pictures of Luther, pictures of the church, pictures of old Mosaic Stadium, and on and on. Right. Anyways, this is Luther College, and it was in the form that I remembered it when we first came to Regina. Okay. So now this is what happened. In 1991, Randy Farrell, who was one of the pastors at Our Savior's Lutheran Church, went on a sabbatical. And Randy also taught at Luther College. He taught Christian Ethics 20 at Luther College. And so now he was going on sabbatical and wasn't available to teach. And so Alan Christensen, who was the vice principal at the time and a member of Christ Lutheran, came to me and said, Dennis, would you mind filling in for this semester while Randy is away? And I thought, well, I'll give it a stab. It's working with young people, and that was my primary focus in those days. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. And so I got Randy Farrell's notes and whatever, and I taught the semester and survived the first semester, and it was all okay. And then afterwards, the next year, they had so many students that they needed to have more Christian ethics teachers. So Randy was still on, and they asked, well, could you teach again? So I said, sure, I guess I could do that. And then Randy Farrell eventually took a call somewhere else, and then they've been asking me ever since. So since 1991, I've been teaching Christian Ethics 20 at Luther College almost every semester. I think I've only missed 2 semesters in that whole time, so 32 years. They allowed me to develop my own curriculum, basically. They had a general sense of what you needed to cover, but I could decide how I wanted to present it and organize it and all that kind of stuff. And over the years, I adapted it. Probably within 3 years, it didn't look anything like the material I got from Randy Farrell. I had, kind of made it my own. And I've been teaching that ever since. And then it dawned on me one day that some of you might actually be interested in this material in the way that I teach it to my students over there, generally speaking. Now, I'm going to modify it somewhat for this class because you're adults, A, right? And you're interested in this course. B, that's not always the case with students over there. And you all have some background in Christianity. What I have over there is a mixture. And there are students who have a lot of understanding of Christianity because they've grown up in the church. And there's students who have no understanding because either they come from a culture where that is the case, or they grew up in a family where they were not involved in the church at all. And then I've got students from a wide variety of denominations. So there's everything from Lutherans, there's some Lutherans still there, and Catholics and Pentecostals and Alliance and Baptists, and you get a wide range. And in more recent years, we've actually had also other religions. So there's some Muslim students there. I've had some Buddhist students in the past, and so forth. So it's quite a diverse crowd. And so what I decided is that I need to really start with the basics, build from the basics up. You can't have this assumption that people kind of really know what Christianity is all about. And then I say to the students who have been, like raised in the church, I say, and you got to be careful that you don't just think that you can give me Sunday school answers and it will be okay. Because the answer to every question in this class is not Jesus. Like in Sunday school, that was usually you could say Jesus and you were right most of the time, right? Okay, but that's not the case here. So that's what you're going to get, is you're going to get my class kind of distilled for you particularly. But this is basically the way I approach this and whatnot. Now, I'm just going to tell you something else because it's fun, and that is Beth Kellen, who's sitting right over there, is the new Christian Ethics 9 teacher over at Luther College. And I've been asked to sort of be her mentor. So she has questions. She comes to me and she's been sending me questions all semester because her class asks her hard questions. My class doesn't ask me questions like that for the most part. Yeah. So anyways, so it's kind of fun to have another Christian ethics teacher here. All right. So that's what this course is all about. And with that as an introduction, we're going to jump in. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that in this overview of Christianity, I divided into kind of two sections, or like I interspersed these sections, but two streams. The one stream is called Christian themes. So we're going to look at some of the basic themes that are present in Christianity. All right. And that's where we're going to focus. The other stream that I cover is history, the history of Christianity. Because you have to talk about it. And when we look at the history, I look at both the positive parts of Christian history and some of the negative parts too, because I think we need to be honest about that. For this study, I'm just focusing on the themes. We're not doing any of the history section now. When we get done this, if people are interested in the history section, then I might offer that at some point in the future. But we're looking at the primary themes that are present in Christianity. Okay, so here is where we're going to start. We're going to start at a place that won't make sense at first, but trust me, we keep coming back to this over and over again. And this is it, a holistic understanding of human life. So what this is an understanding about our human life being sort of experienced in 4 quadrants or 4 aspects. So this is the 4 ways of being human. And I'm going to start with this question. So if you were out walking in the forest one day and you come across a skeleton, okay? You come across a skeleton. How do you know whether you're dealing with a human skeleton or some other kind of animal like a cow or something? How would you know? Okay, or you look at the head. Yeah. Sorry, who was out there? Tanya, what did you say?
Just landmarks on the brain, on the skull. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the way the skull looks, right? What other clues? Let's say the skull is missing. Yeah, 4 limbs, but different, like, arms and legs different, so, all right, what we're talking about is one of the most important ways that we identify someone as human, and that begins with the letter P. Can you figure out what this is? There you go. Okay, now, this chart is divided into 4, and it's a pie chart that conveniently spells pies. Isn't that great? So it's an easy way to remember it. And here is, where is it? There it is. So there's physical. So part of what we are as humans is we are a particular physical type of being. Like we are different than other creatures, and that difference is a physical difference, right? Now there are some creatures who are similar to us, like some of the other primates, gorillas and chimpanzees, similar in some ways. But we are unique in lots of different ways. Now, one of the ways that we are unique and different from all the other animals is the one that starts with the letter I. And I wonder if any of you could guess what that might be. Yeah, it's our intellectual being, right? This is not to say that other animals don't have some form of intelligence. And in fact, we're starting to realize that some of the animals have a high level of intelligence in certain ways, right? But I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. So dogs can be trained to learn certain words, right? And some dogs have apparently gotten up to, hundreds of words that they can distinguish. So you could say, and I saw this one guy who did this, he named a toy, and the dog, this was on television, and the dog went around back and picked up that toy from about 100 toys and brought that one out. So go get the donkey, goes, gets the donkey, brings it back. Go get the monkey, goes it. So that animal was able to recognize a number of different words. But the one thing that dog couldn't do, likewise with our dog, right? Like our dog recognizes certain words, right? And stuff. But what our dog can't do is can't talk to me, right? The bark might be, you could say, well, that's a hungry bark. That's an angry bark, but that's about it. You can't, like, the dog will bark at something outside. And so I'll go up and I'll say, what did you see? What did you see? And the dog just looks at me like, I can't tell you. So intelligence is an important part of what makes us human. Our ability to express ourselves and to understand things at a high level. Okay. All right. So now, can you imagine what the E stands for? That's right. Because we are not just rational beings, we are emotional beings, and emotions are different than our intellect. Because there are times that we will experience things emotionally and we will say to ourselves, I don't know why I'm feeling that. I don't know why that affected me as strongly as it did, or whatever, right? So we don't understand some of this stuff, or, like, I don't know why I acted like that, because now upon reflection, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that. But emotions can drive our behavior, and in ways that we don't always understand, right? So that's an important part of our being too, right? So if you're a Trekkie, right, in both the original series and in Star Trek: The Next Generation, there were characters who were on the show to give us a picture of what it would look like to be a human without emotions. So what characters were those? Spock in the first series, of course, the Vulcan, and in the second series, in the Next Generation, Data, the android, right? And Data wanted, like Pinocchio, wanted so bad to have emotions. And I remember one episode where they found, or they were able to create an emotion chip and put it in him. And then he got overwhelmed, and then he didn't want emotions anymore and stuff. It was like that. But that's part of our reality as humans. Okay, now can you guess what the S is for? Yeah, it's for spiritual. And one of the things that I have to tell my students is that everyone has the spiritual component, even if they're not religious, because a lot of people make the assumption that spirituality is religiosity. And I say, well, religiosity is connected to spirituality, but they're not exactly the same. And we will go through this now and kind of unpack what we mean by these things. So this picture, this holistic understanding of human life, will show up throughout my whole course. Like I keep coming back to it. So that's why I start with it, right? Plus, I want them as the students, as I do with you, I want you to recognize that everything we're going to be talking about in this overview of Christianity relates to our human experience in one form or another, right? Whether it's relating intellectually or relating emotionally or relating spiritually. And all of it is packaged in our physical being, right? All right, so now let's unpack each of these areas. And by the way, those of you who are online, I can see if people in the room here have a question or a comment, they'll raise their hands or whatever. I'll just trust you to unmute yourself and to interrupt if you have a question or a comment, okay? All right, because I'll just barrel ahead unless people, periodically I'll stop and ask if you have questions. But if you have something that you need to get clarified right away or whatever, just interrupt, okay? All right, so let's carry on, shall we? All right, so now we're going to unpack each one of these four areas as to what I mean by them. And we'll start with the physical one. Okay, what do we mean by our physical being? And what we mean by that is literally our flesh and bones. Okay, this biological package that we have, that's what it means. Literally, that's our physical being, right? But I'm more interested in what it represents or what it signifies, because that's where it will show up in our discussions and in our material here. And this is what our physical being signifies. It signifies our identity and presence. So what do I mean by each of those? Let's start with identity. Okay. So the unique thing about our physical being is that no two of us are exactly alike physically, right? We identify each other because of our physical differences, height, color of hair, color of eyes, so on and so forth. What is the one characteristic, physical characteristic, that is absolutely unique to every single person? Fingerprints. Did you know that that's true even for identical twins? Yeah. Identical twins have different fingerprints, right? And then now that we have the technology, we can actually go down deeper to the level of DNA, and then we can find differences there, right? But we have that. Just out of curiosity, see if you know, what are some of the other techniques that are used to identify you as a unique person that is not fingerprints? We have technology today to do these. Yeah, retinal scan, right? So the pattern in the back of your eye is different and unique for every single person. That's crazy, because we got 7 billion of us, right? But that's how we're made. So we all have a unique identity, and that unique identity is partly this physical package that we have, right? Now, it also has to do with our unique thoughts, our unique emotions, and all that stuff too. But it starts in the physical package. We're all unique that way, right? Now, presence. What do I mean by presence? You here in the room, not you online, but you here in the room, you are present with me. How do I know that? I can see you here. I can hear your voices. I can see you looking at me, and so on and so forth. And that presence, right, is something that is really important for humans, because in the very beginning of the first book in the Bible, Genesis, it says something important about humans. And Mervyn, I'm going to ask if you think you know what that is. What does it say about Adam? At one point, God says it's not good that. Do you have any idea? Anyone? It's not good that he is alone. Okay. Humans are meant to be in community with one another, right? In relationship with one another. And that's from the very beginning, it stipulates that. And how do we express our relationship, our connection with one another? Primarily, we do it through presence. So, we might, if you got a family member and you haven't seen them for a while, what are you going to do? You might give them a hug, certainly a smile, right? Or you might, pat them on the back if they've done a good job or whatever, right? There's physical presence. Now, physical presence is so powerful that sometimes you can be with someone and not say a thing, not do a thing. Just being with them is all they need at that moment, right? You can really see this with toddlers, right? Because sometimes all they want is they just want mom or dad or grandma or whoever just to be in the room. If they're in the room, then it's okay, right? Then they'll calm down or whatever. Presence is powerful, and I don't know if we always give it as much credit as it does. And so our physical being is able to say, so one of the ways we say, I want to be with you, right, is literally being with them physically. So let's go out for a meal together, or let's go do an activity together, something like that. That expresses relationship. And so that's what I mean by presence, identity and presence. Mary. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's now COVID has forced us to use technology like Zoom, right? And that's great, because then people who can't join any other way because they live in Florida or Alberta, or they're sick, or their schedule doesn't allow, or whatever, right? It allows them to be present, but not quite as fully. So one of the difficulties, those of you who are online, is that you cannot see, just because of the limits, you cannot see the expressions of other people in the room and so on and so forth. So it's a lesser presence, but at least it's something. And so we're grateful for that. So we're not going to put that down. But all right, now there's two words I'm going to throw up on the screen here that I want you to remember in terms of our physical presence, what it or our physical being, what it sort of stands for, or what it is important. First of all, it says we belong. Right? We belong. We belong together. We belong to this world. We belong to the group called humans. We have a place. We have a place in this creation, and we have a place with one another. And in fact, I think that's one of the things that Jesus teaches very clearly is the necessity to be with one another in a loving, caring manner. That's part of what he teaches his disciples, in essence, right? And does it by word and action. Okay, so the first thing, we belong. Second thing, we're unique. So belonging does not mean that you have to be the same as everybody else. And in fact, what makes a group stronger is when people bring a diversity of gifts, abilities, perspectives, understandings, and so forth to that group. So for example, I am not mechanically inclined. So if something is broken and it's mechanical in some way, right, I cannot necessarily figure out, how can I fix this? But I know people who are, and they'll look at that and they'll go, oh, this is what, here, we can do this when you do this. And I go, how do you know that? But at the same time, they'll ask me, how do you do what you do? Like how can you get up there and preach a sermon? Or how can you get up there and play the music the way you do? We all have different gifts. We're all unique. But when we combine all those unique gifts together, it strengthens the whole. So that's all in this package called physical, right? Like everything I expressed to you is stuff we do with our physical being, right? Even mechanically inclined or whatever. That's all part of that. All right. So let me stop here for a minute. Any questions or comments on our physical being? Okay. Now, I'm just going to keep coming like a bulldozer here. It's just going to keep coming, all this content. And if it's going too fast, you just slow me down. Okay. Ready? All right, let's move on. We're now going to look at the intellectual part of life. So now, when we talk about our intellectual being, what are we measuring when we measure like someone's IQ? What specifically are we measuring? Or let's just say a test at school. You take a test at school. What is the test determining? Go ahead, Eric. Okay, your knowledge. So then we're getting there. We're getting there. So how do you know? Sorry, Jim. Your memory. So you learned it, but it's stuck in there, and now you're able to repeat it out. So memory is one of the important things about intelligence. We're able to remember stuff, and we're able to remember a lot of stuff, right? An amazing amount of stuff that we can store up here, really. Okay, but that's the first part. Then the second part is something different. Yeah, like comprehension gets at it. It means I've got this information. Can I work with it in a meaningful way, right? So can I take this information that I've got and apply it or whatever, right? And the word I'm going to use is not comprehension, but it's kind of similar to that. All right, so here is, first of all, what it means, memory and creativity. So I've got the information, and now I can apply it in new ways, right? So I've learned this math formula, but now I can actually see how it works in this setting, and so forth, right? I've learned about metaphor in English, but now I can take that understanding and metaphor and apply it in a different, like I read a different story or whatever. And I go, oh, I see the metaphor here, or whatever. So that's creativity. Now, when I use the word creativity, a lot of people think, well, I'm not creative, right? A lot of people say that. You're all creative. Every single one of you is creative. I can say that for two reasons. One, I believe that's partly what it means in Genesis when it says that we are made in the image of God, because this is right after the creation story. So if we're made in the image of God, I believe part of that means we are creative, like God is creative. I think that's part of it. Okay. But the other thing is just based on observation. So let me give you an example of what I mean by being creative. Did any of you have a conversation today with somebody? Probably you all did, right? Well, when you had a conversation, was that pre-scripted?
No.
You mean you made it up on the spot? You were being creative. You were taking the vocabulary you had in memory and putting it together in a new way to interact with another person. All right. So when you converse, you are being creative. You may not think of it that way, but that's exactly what it is. Now, the other example I like to use is, how many of you cook? Probably a lot of you. Yeah. All right. Do you always follow the recipe? 90%. But there's that 10%, Marie, that it's like, oh, I'm out of something.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what do you say? Well, maybe I could substitute this instead. Or maybe I could try this. You know, I'm forever changing. Like, I just open up the spice cupboard and I go, let's see. I think this time I'm going to put this. And then it's a guessing game at home, because I'll say, can you guess what the secret ingredient is? And then they have to guess, you know, what spice I put into the soup or whatever, right? My favorite one these days is curry. Before that, it used to be oregano, and always oregano and everything. Now it's curry and everything. But that's being creative too, right? And so a lot of times when people hear the word creative, they think that you're talking about artisticness, like being like a musician or a writer or a sculptor or anything like that, right? But actually, creativity is part of who we are as humans. You know, and the fact that we have got incredible technology right now that can do astounding things, really. Like if you went back 100 years and then told them what kind of technology we were going to have 100 years down the road, they would not believe it's possible. So how did that come about? Through human creativity and memory. But now some of our memory is stored in books. So the fact that we read and we can read books, right? Like we learned how to do this. We're like, you know what? This is important information. We're going to write it down so that we can remember it. And that's exactly how we got our Bible, right? This is important stuff. Let's write it down so future generations can remember what we understood or learned or whatever, right? Or was revealed to us. Okay, so now, what does intellectual part of us signify? I would say it signifies our thoughts and our dreams. So our thoughts, meaning what we're thinking right now, what's going on right now in our brains as we're sorting out the world around us and whatever, and our dreams being what we are hoping for in the future. So this is what I'm hoping to do. This is what I'm aiming for, and this is, you know, we have plans about how we're going to get there. That's what I mean by dreams. So not dreams in the sense of I had a weird dream last night, and lately I've been having weird dreams that I'm remembering some of them, and it's like, where did that come from, right? Yeah, maybe too much curry. Maybe too much curry. So that's what it signifies, our thoughts and dreams. And when you read scriptures, you can see this all over the place, right? People expressing their thoughts and people also expressing their dreams. All right, so here are the two words that I'm going to attach to that: understanding and imagination. That our intellectual part of us is about our understanding of the world and our ability to understand the world, and our imagination as we envision a new possible world, right? And in fact, I would say that one of the things that the prophets did in the Old Testament particularly is the prophets used their understanding to help imagine a new possibility. And so then they paint this picture of new possibility that if people are faithful to God, then this new possibility could happen. Okay. Anyways, we'll I'm getting ahead of myself. That's what I'm doing here. All right. So now let's go to the emotional part. So the emotional part of us, we understand less than the first two. So as we go around this circle, we're going from stuff that we understand quite well to stuff we understand not so well. So for example, physically, we actually understand our physical selves pretty good. Like you will know if you're not feeling well, right? Like you just go, oh, I'm not feeling good today. You know, I got chills, or I'm achy, or I've got a headache. And or you learn what your physical limits are. You know, like athletes, you know, they'll say, this is as fast as I can skate. You know, I don't know if I can go any faster. So we understand our sort of our bodies to a high degree, right? We understand, like, for example, our, our weight, what that means. You know, so it's people who step on the scale every day kind of, well, okay, now that I know what that is from, too much Halloween candy or whatever, right? Yeah. And then intellectually, I think we understand not necessarily how the intellect works, but we understand to a certain degree what we understand. Do you follow that? Like we know what we know, and we know what we don't know. Except some people, what is that called? The Dunning-Kruger effect. Does that sound right, Beth? Anyways, it's when somebody is so stupid they don't realize how stupid they are. Right. And you'll see this sometimes in effect where somebody they'll say, oh yeah, I know how that works. And it's like, you don't have a clue how that works. You know, it's when people will challenge the experts, right? And they don't really know. But they don't know enough. So this is the thing I know about experts. The more you learn about an area, the more you realize there is to learn. So you talk to a top level physicist and they'll say, it's mostly mystery. Like, this is what we figured out, but there's a whole bunch of stuff and the more that we peer into this, the more we realize we don't understand. I remember in high school learning about photosynthesis. And, you know, the way it was taught by my high school teacher is, this is a pretty simple process. This happens, and then this is the result. It's a simple process. And then it wasn't more than 10 years later. It's like, photosynthesis is a complex process, and we don't even fully understand it, and on, right? The more we learn. So I am far more likely to consider somebody who is humble enough to say, well, this is what my understanding is, but my understanding is limited. I will listen to them more than somebody who is certain about something, because if they're certain, to me, it means they haven't really done enough, you know, research or something yet. Now I'm overstating it, but that's anyways. All right. So now we get to the emotional part, which we don't understand very well at all. Like, how many of you have a phobia? Okay. Does your phobia make sense? No, I'll pick on Joshua for a minute here. So, you know, Joshua's our big son, right? You know, tall guy, you know, like he sometimes looks like a Viking. He's got his beard and his long hair. You look like except he could never be a good Viking. He would not be. It's not violent enough or something. Is this not a singing Viking maybe, but not, yeah. But anyways, Joshua has a phobia that I sometimes get a kick out of. And this is not fair to him, but he's definitely afraid of spiders. So there'd be a little spider in his room, right? And Joshua will come and say to me, Dad, there's a spider in my room. Okay, I'll go and take care of it. So I go and take care of the spider. It's totally irrational. And he knows it. Doesn't matter. So mine is snakes, right? And really, my mom will say that I got it from her, but I'm not blaming you at all, Mom. I think I have a theory about phobias, but whatever. But here's the thing about snakes, right? I never had a snake attack me or anything like that, right? But my phobia was so strong that, especially like when I was a young adult, you know, I'd be flipping through a magazine or something like that, and there'd be a picture of a snake, and I would drop the magazine, right? It was, oh, like that, right? Like, oh, and then I get creeped out and whatnot, right? I know intellectually that that's a totally irrational response, especially like around here. What are the snakes we have around here? Garter snakes. There's the occasional bull snake, but yes, Scotty.
Do you think that has any basis for the Bible?
No, you want to know my theory? Here's my theory. My theory about phobias is we now know, this is recent information, that we know that traumatic experiences changes the DNA of a person. And so what I suspect is that all these phobias can be traced back far enough back that some ancestor of ours had a bad experience with the dark, with a spider, with a snake, with a mouse, right? And it was traumatic, and maybe it caused the death of someone or something like that. It was traumatic, that changed their DNA, that DNA got passed on. That's my theory, but I'm not a biologist, so don't take it as gospel truth. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I know you like snakes, right? And I could never understand people like you, right? But at the same time, there's probably things that I like that other people say, I don't know why you like that, right? So we're all unique that way. But I don't think it's because like it's a serpent in the Garden of Eden that tempts Eve. I don't think that's the reason. It's not theological, because I had this phobia way before I really understood those things, right? It's weird. And certainly that wouldn't account for other phobias that people have, like spiders. I mean, I don't know if there's even spiders mentioned anywhere in a significant way in the Bible. I'd have to look. Now you got me curious. Mervyn.
The experience when I was quite young, maybe 8 or 9 years old, lived on the farm, and I got chased around the farmhouse 3 times by a bird.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So now if a bird was to fly into this room, I'd be under that table.
There you go.
2 seconds.
Yeah. So I think sometimes in childhood, you can have an experience that will change you as well. So it could be, Mervyn, that your DNA changed, and if that was ever passed on to someone, they would have a fear of birds and they don't know why.
Very great. So there's no chance that.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So let's look at emotions. What are we talking about when we talk about emotions? Well, we're talking about our feelings and intuition. All right. Our feelings and intuition. So, I feel sad, I feel happy, I feel angry, I feel nervous, whatever, or intuition. I've got a bad feeling about this. Or I think this is a good idea. I sense that this is a good idea, right? And then if you ask someone to explain, why do you think that's a bad idea, or why do you think that's a good idea? They can't put a finger on it. I don't know. It just something about it makes it seem good or bad or whatever, right? That's the intuition. All right. So now, where in the world are these things coming from? Here is my quick answer. It's our primitive gut response. It's our gut response. So here's what I learned, like in my university, biological psychology class in university, like this is whatever, 40 some years ago, 42 years ago. But I haven't heard anything to contradict it since. So when you're having an emotional response, there is a place where it begins physiologically. So in your body, in your physical self, there is a place where your emotions begin. Where is that? In your gut, in your core. And this is how they figured it out. What they did is they wired people up, to sense their physical reaction to stuff, and then they gave them a buzzer. And then they showed them pictures on a screen. And some of the pictures were designed to elicit strong emotional responses, either really favorable ones, so they might be a picture of a baby or of a puppy or something like that. Some were meant to elicit negative ones, so it could be like a snake or a tiger about to pounce or something like that. And some were just neutral. And then the people, when they were experiencing an emotion, they were supposed to push a button, okay? And then identify the emotion after they pushed the button. Okay, so this is what they discovered. is that the first thing that happened, way before the button was ever pushed, is that there was something that happened in their core, right? And it kicked the adrenal system into gear so that adrenaline is being produced so that the body was ready to react however was necessary, fight or flight or whatever, right? And so even before they could identify what's going on. So this is what the psychologists speculated. So the body is telling you something important or significant is happening. And then you take in the information going on around you, and then you go, okay, I am frightened, I'm excited, I'm whatever. But the physiological response is similar. And so think about all the expressions we have about feelings related to our stomach. So what are some of them? Yeah, so I have butterflies in my stomach, right? But it could be a positive thing or a negative thing. Like you're excited about someone coming that you haven't seen in a long time, and you got butterflies in your stomach. But that's because you're excited in a positive way. Or you could be nervous about having to do something, and you might say, I've got butterflies in my stomach, and that's a negative thing, right? But you base your interpretation of the physiological response on the circumstances. So you're using, this is interesting, I want you to follow this, you're using your physical response, intellectually, you're assessing it, and then you determine what your emotion is. You're experiencing the emotion already, but then you go, oh, I must be sad, I must be happy. I'm oversimplifying it, but that's, in essence, that's what's happening. And because it is a primitive response, and I don't know if you've heard this theory. There's a theory out there that says that we actually have two brains in our body, and the one brain is in the head, and the other brain is in our gut. And that the brain in our gut is one we really don't understand much about, but it impacts us in so many ways. And so what's happening in the gut is a primitive thing, goes way, way back, designed to protect us, keep us safe, and so on and so forth, right? But it's not one that is always rational or that we can think it through, and so then we'll react and we won't know why. I don't know why I got so mad about that, or I don't know why that made me so laugh so hard, but I sure laughed hard and that was good or whatever, right? So that's kind of a mystery, but it's part of our human nature and we need to recognize it, right? Even Jesus had emotions, right? Mervyn.
There might be something in your chemical makeup of your blood that your brain, as soon as it senses something, it goes through your blood system so quickly that it reacts down here.
I mean, that's possible. And I'd have to see if anyone had done any research on that. The other thing, and this is a good time to mention this, Mervyn, is that all of these four things, right, are all interconnected and influence each other. So for example, if you're feeling sick physically, how does that impact you intellectually? You don't think as clearly, right? Let's say that you've had a really happy experience, okay? So something really, really delightful. How does that impact you physically? You just feel better. The pain isn't there right now because I was experiencing pain before, but right now I'm not because it's so joyous. So you know what my joyous moment was this week? Yeah. When they brought Celine over in her costume, because that is the cutest costume I've ever seen for a toddler, and it was just delightful. So in case you didn't see it on my Facebook post, Celine was spaghetti and meatballs, and it's great. Oh, it was so cute. And so nothing else that evening mattered. I just felt good, and so all these things are interconnected, and it's not like you can just separate them all out distinctly. They all influence each other, and yeah. All right, so let's keep going. How are we doing for time? All right, we're good. Yeah, okay.
There's a lot more complex
Yeah.
than just that. So it just triggers all the reactions in the gut and stuff like that. That's going back 40, 50 years. Yeah.
Cortisol. And that works from the pituitary. It's not punishment for my mind. And my body does not produce enough of that episode where I was getting all the symptoms. So I got my medication after here. So what's changed?
Yeah.
Something in my-
So, yeah. We are incredibly complex. We're incredibly complex. And that's all right. So now let's wrap up emotions here. Emotions can either be helpful or challenging. That's the word I'm going to use, right? So sometimes emotions are really quite helpful, right? But other times they can cause a problem, right? All right. So now let's get to the one that we all were waiting for, weren't we? The spiritual part of life. So what do I mean by spiritual? Especially if I say it's not necessarily religious. Okay, so here's how we're going to define it. We're going to define spiritual as longing to connect beyond oneself. And I'm going to unpack this for you a little bit so you get a sense of what this is all about. Okay, so the first three are all internalized. This is my feelings. These are my thoughts. This is my body, how I'm feeling, right? Now the question is, what does this package have to do with everything else? In other words, where do I fit? Where do I belong? What is the point of my life? How did I get here? All these kind of questions are connected with our need and desire to understand our place in the bigger picture, right? And usually then, if you expand that out far enough, then you get to God, right? So it's not just the other people around, but it's like, yeah, but what, you start expanding out. And so it's that longing to connect, right? That is part of our spirituality. So what I mean by that is we ask these questions of purpose, and we can say purpose and meaning, right? What's the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my life? And almost always the answer to those questions is in relation to others, or in relation to God, right? Most people will answer those questions in relation to others or in relation to God. So if I ask my students at Luther, well, what is the purpose of your life, right? Some of them will say things like, well, to make things better for my family or make things better for others, right? So then that's in relation to others. They're connecting with others in this sense. I am here to, to make the world a better place. That'd be one answer. I mean, they come up with other answers too. Very few of them have ever gotten sort of really so self-centered that they say, what is the purpose of life? Well, just for me to have fun. Like when they're being serious, they don't answer it that way, right? They recognize that it is not good to be alone. And if it's always about me, I'm going to end up being alone. Eric. Well, you could say, was it hedonism? Narcissism? Maybe narcissism. I mean, there are people who are that way, and usually they end up making a lot of problems in the world, right? I mean, they end up causing problems, and whatnot. All right, well, let's look at the two words that I connect with the spiritual part of life, which is awe and wonder. Awe and wonder. And this is our sort of experience of when we have a sense of connection with the bigger picture, it often leaves us with awe or wonder. And so a very common image for a spiritual experience is this next picture. I think sums it up. I found this and I thought it's great. So what do you see there? Not necessarily, but it is a mountain. You got a person on a mountain and they're looking at the heavens, the cosmos, right? And so there is a reason why a lot of times people will talk about spiritual experiences as a mountaintop experience, right? There is a reason why in the Psalms, the psalmist says, when I look at the heavens and consider all that you have made, what are humans that you even consider us? And yet you have made us just a little lower than the angels. Like there's this awe and wonder about that. And so some of this spiritual experience that people have, this resonance with their spiritual part of life, simply comes from observing the world around them. And particularly scenes in nature that are filled with power and or grandiosity. And so that's why mountains, I think, are. So in the Bible, by the way, in case you didn't know this, most of the time that God is revealed, like that God reveals God's self to people, right? It happens on a mountaintop. So can you give me examples of what that is? Moses on Mount Sinai. Think of a New Testament story. Transfiguration, the transfiguration. And that's not a surprise that encounters with God would often be pictured on a mountaintop. Now, that's not the only place that God is revealed. But I mean, those things, like people would just instantly go, oh yeah, Moses on a mountaintop, meeting God, get it. I get that. When I used to go skiing with the youth group, the thing that I liked the best was not necessarily skiing down the mountains. It was going up the ski lift and just looking at the mountains and just going, wow, this is amazing. Okay, but now I'm going to tell you my favorite awe and wonder story, okay? And I apologize because some of you have heard this before. Oh, who had a chat thing? Oh, look at that. Thank you for noticing. Oh, Donna, maybe she had to leave. That could be. Okay. All right. So if you've heard this story before, my apologies. If you haven't, here it goes. This is the first time I experienced awe and wonder connected with my spiritual being that I remember. Okay. All right. So I'm a teenager. I'm at 15 or 16. I'm a counselor at a church camp. At the time, it was Sylvan Lake Bible Camp. It's now been renamed as Curiacas Bible Camp, right near Red Deer. And I was feeling pretty important because I was a counselor, and I got to lead these kids, and that was feeling good. And it was Wednesday, and on Wednesdays we had a tradition of leading the kids to the haunted sauna. That's what we called it. And the haunted sauna was really just an old sauna that some Scandinavian guy had built in the woods, and it just hadn't been used for years, so it was starting to fall down. And we did this, and the trick was one of the counselors led the group there, and then everyone got into the sauna, and then another counselor was hiding up in the rafters, and then they would drop down, and then the kids would scream, and we'd all have fun. That's how this is supposed to work, okay? So my job was to lead the kids to the sauna, okay? And my friend Jeff was in the rafters waiting for him. So I'm leading the kids around the perimeter of the camp, and the camp is it's wooded. It's in woods, but it borders on farmland. So I'm walking. We got woods on one side and grain field on the other side, and we're walking along. And one of the kids says, "What's that?" and points into the field. And I'm thinking, like, what, is some animal or something like that? And then I see something that totally baffles me, and I cannot figure this out. And at the time, I didn't know what they were called. I now know. It was a crop circle. It was about 3 meters across, and it was like grain that had been compressed in a circle. And it was in like a perfect circle. And I could not, for the life of me, figure out what this was. That was before crop circles ever became a thing in the media and whatnot. all I could imagine is that some rabid animal was running in circles and there's some wild animal that's going to attack us or something like that. And I couldn't answer the kid. So I was starting to feel a little bit like a failure. So I said, I don't know. I think grain does that sometimes. Like, I think I just made up something. And said, let's keep going, kids. So then we're walking a little further, and then there's a scream from the back of the group. It's, oh, now what? And I go back there, and one of the kids had fainted, and then her friends are around her, and they're saying, "Oh, I think she forgot to take her medicine." What? It's like, oh. So then one of the boys says, "I'll run back to the camp and get her medicine." So he finds out from the girls what kid, and off he runs. Okay. So then, meanwhile, the girl kind of comes to, and she's sitting up, and we're, all right, now we're waiting for the medicine to arrive. And here comes the guy coming through the forest, and he comes out into an opening. He's got his hand held high, and he's got the medicine in his hand, and he yells, he says, "Calvary to the rescue." And as soon as he says that, he disappears. He's gone. He's just gone. And everyone does a collective gasp. And we're all holding our breath. And then we hear this. Oh, because what had happened is he had run into an abandoned basement. So he ran and just dropped down into the basement. So then we get over to there, and we have to get him out of the basement. And then we look at the watch. It's like, now we got to go back. It's cocoa time. We didn't even get to the sauna. And it's like, I am feeling like a total failure. I go back. We take the kids back. I give this girl a piggyback ride. We get there, and now the kids have their cocoa and their puffed wheat squares, and the counselors have a half hour to themselves because the adults are now taking care of the kids in the dining hall. Well, he came in because he realized it was past time, and he came and he was mad. How come you guys didn't come there? So here's the point, and like that whole long setup is to say this. I felt like a total failure, right? Like looking back on it now, it's humorous. But at the time, I felt like I am a total failure. I am not a good counselor. I'm not a good leader. I'm not. Anyways, so what happened is me and another counselor went off and just had to get out of there. And we went down a secret trail we knew, only counselors knew, down to a little tiny spot on the shore of the lake that was surrounded by trees, and just a little spot of grass where you could just sit, and it was sort of a private, quiet place. And we were sitting there in silence, and this is what I saw. Okay, first of all, not a hint of wind. So the lake is like a mirror. It's just pure glass, right? And off to my left, because we're facing north, off to my left is the remnants of the sunset. So there's reds and purples in the sky over here. And then in front of me, for the first time that I had ever seen in my life, were the northern lights dancing down the sky, and they touched the horizon and were reflected in the water, right? And that was amazing, but it wasn't the end, because also in those few minutes we were sitting there, there was a meteorite shower. So there was falling stars going through all right. And as I'm sitting there, taking this all in and being filled with awe and wonder, I have this sense, it's not like an audible voice, but I have this sense that God is saying, it's okay, Dennis, I'm here. It's not the end of the world. Things are still good. And, you will be fine as a leader, right? This is not the end of your leadership time. And from that point on, Northern Lights had that sense for me. There was always a sense that God was saying, I'm here, it's okay. And sometimes I needed to hear that message. Like, there was one time I was driving back to seminary, and I was like struggling with, the academics and stuff. And it's like, oh man, should I really continue on with this? Northern Lights were there. Got out of the car. Beth and I were there. Like, Beth was with me. We got out. We just watched the Northern Lights for a minute. And I said, yeah, I'm going back. I'm getting back and just get out of it again. Okay. All right. That's what I mean by awe and wonder. That sense of connection that I had with the bigger picture, right? Now, I know how Aurora is formed based on scientific theory. That doesn't take away from the awe and wonder of seeing them, right? So that most people can relate to that sort of sense, even if they can't name it or describe it. most people have had an experience like that, and quite often it's in nature. Not always, but quite often. So let me just quickly ask if any of you can identify a time when you were experiencing something that you just went, wow, and then you had a sense of connection with God or with the world. Eric.
About 30 feet to like, I want to say the east of our camping spot, there was just a huge cliff overlooking like this forest and the lake and like the campgrounds of water beneath us, right? So I remember just like coming out of the trees of the forest and just overlooking this massive cliff.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah, okay, Mary. Oh, yeah.
So it maybe just a duck in a water or the way
Yeah. Well, and if we are, so many of us are visual people, right? And we respond to, and so, you see the scene in nature and it just goes, like something goes bing, bing, and most people have had that experience. Like, I'll tell you another time I had that experience or something similar, was at Kakabeka Falls. Have any of you been to Kakabeka Falls? It's near Thunder Bay. You can get really close to them. And man, that's like, and you could stand close to Niagara Falls too, but it's so commercialized. This is rough, right? Like you feel like you're out in the wilderness. Well, now imagine you are an ancient Israelite, and most of the world is the natural world. You're going to encounter these things all the time. Like, what does Abraham say when God is making a covenant with him? What does God show him? I wonder if you know this. It's related to what we've been talking about. He says to Abraham, look at the stars. Look at the stars. You will have more descendants than all the stars. And you can imagine Abraham standing there going, wow, that's a lot of descendants. Wow. Because in those days, there was no light pollution. So you could see the stars really well. He was seeing a lot of stars. All right, so that's why we have this picture up here. All right, how are we doing for time? Okay, how come it's not going? Go ahead. I need you to go ahead. It's like it's stuck. Oh, good. Okay, we got it. Okay. So here's a quote that I came across by a writer named Deb Hirsch that I think really does a good job of summarizing spirituality. I can send these slides out to you guys. You don't have to take pictures if you don't want. I mean, you can, but I can send these slides out. Okay. Spirituality can be described as a vast longing that drives us beyond ourselves in an attempt to connect with, to probe, and to understand our world. And beyond that, it is the inner compulsion to connection with the eternal other that is God. So we cannot get more other than us than God, right? Because God is so beyond us, right? So in an attempt to connect with the big picture with this, it's God. The way Augustine put it is this. He says, in each of us, there is a God-shaped hole that cannot be filled except by God. And it's that long. He's describing that longing. And most people have it, even if they can't identify what it is. And they will search for it in all kinds of ways. And so you'll find people doing spiritual quests, and they're trying to fulfill that hole, and they're trying to fulfill it with all kinds of stuff. But the only thing that really satisfies, as Augustine would say, is connecting with God. That's the only thing. And so you will be restless until you connect with God, is kind of what Augustine was pointing out. And if you know the story of Augustine, he tried all kinds of stuff in his early youth. Like, he tried different religions, he tried different kinds. He was a hedonist, Eric. You were talking about that? He was a hedonist for a while. He tried all kinds of things, nothing satisfied until he became a Christian and discovered the fulfillment of his spiritual longing in Christ.
So is that something?
I would say, yeah, I would describe it slightly different. I would say it's built into us. God designed us with that compulsion so that we are driven to relationship with God. Yeah. Yes. No, I think it's all people, but some people have blocked it out. Some people have shut it down, like that inner compulsion. They've tried to fill it with other stuff or whatever. Like people respond to it differently, but I think that compulsion is there for all people in one form or another, and they may not recognize what it is, but they just feel driven to. There's something more. That's often what they'll say. There's got to be more to life than this, and then they're trying to figure out what that more is. Yeah.
So then would that be like, okay, we're Christians, you know, the Muslims and the Jewish people and that, but then, so would that same compulsion be like, say, for Buddha or like?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I would say is, I think that compulsion is answered to some degree by all religious systems, right? But I would also say that Christianity has the fullest answer because Christ is God come to us, and thus we don't need to sort of go out and find God. God has come and found us. I mean, that's the whole Jesus, the lost sheep, going out and finding the lost sheep stuff. And so we don't need to denigrate other religions, but we can say that what we have in Christianity is the best answer to that compulsion, is the way I would put it, without having to kind of say other religions are bad or wrong. Like I would say the word I would use, and this is maybe not even fair, I would say they're incomplete or they're misdirected a bit or something like that. Yes. Yeah.
Doesn't matter what religion you have religion, you're still spiritual.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is to some of you saw this on my Facebook post. I just finished reading a book about the son of my math teacher. I can't say his first name, but his last name is Singh. So Mr. Singh's son, who became a commentator for Hockey Night in Canada, but he's sick, so he's got the turban and stuff like that. And reading that book, I learned about some of the basics of the Sikh culture and religion, which I've learned. One of the things I learned is that it's pronounced Sikh, not Sikh, right? But anyways, but it sounds like, to me, it's awkward to say Sikh. It sounds like it's, anyways. But what I learned is, like, man, some of the things that they emphasize would fit right in Christianity. They are very generous. They are very generous, and that's a part of their whole understanding of what their life is for, is to share and stuff. So I would say that. Well, okay, man, I've gotten off here. You guys okay out there in Zoom land? There, you're okay. All right. We say that the Holy Spirit is active throughout the world. So why cannot the Holy Spirit be active even in some other cultures and other religions, right? That doesn't mean that we can't say that we have a good and maybe even a better understanding of how God works, but we don't have to do so at the expense of other religions, right? In terms of saying they're our enemies. They're not our enemies. They're our brothers and sisters who have not yet understood the fullness of the adoption that we have in Christ, is the way I would put it. Yeah, anyways, yeah. And I'll tell you this, sometimes people from other religions are better Christians than Christians. Like I see some people who are self-proclaimed Christians, who the way they're behaving, it's like, I don't recognize that as being Christ-centered at all. And so, you know, famous statement by Gandhi, right? Mahatma Gandhi, who quoted Jesus all the time. I don't know if you know that. He read the Gospels and he quoted Jesus all the time. He said, someone said, well, I see you're always quoting Jesus. And he says, I like your Christ. He says, I don't like your Christians. Because why? The British Empire, who were Christian, right, were dominating the people of India in not nice manner. So, all right. Hang in there. All right. Yep. Oh, GPT.
No place.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't think AI has got the spiritual component. I'm not even sure it has the intellectual component. All right, now what I'm going to try and do, I'm going to go through this quick because I want to get us to the same point where the morning class got to, right? Jordan's laughing. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to show you where the holistic being, these four parts, show up in scriptures. And here is probably the most famous one right here, okay? This passage from Mark 12. And I used the one from Mark, not the one from Luke and Matthew, because Luke and Matthew only name 3 parts. Mark names all 4. So here they are. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, that is your emotional being, with all your soul, that is your spiritual being, with all your mind, that is your intellectual being, and all your strength, that is your physical being. So right there, we have a picture of this commandment that Jesus is repeating from. This is Old Testament stuff, right? He's saying, this is the most important commandment. What is it saying? You love God with your whole being. In other words, don't compartmentalize. Your faith is not just a part of your life. Your faith is all of your life, influencing all parts. And if if faith only is an expression of one part, whether it be your intellectual part or your emotional part or your spiritual part or whatever, right? It's unbalanced, it's incomplete. And so that's why the commandment names all 4 parts, right? So that's the one. But there's one other one that isn't quite as clear, but I'll use it anyways. Jesus grew both in body, that is physical, and in wisdom, that is intellectual, and in favor with God, that is spiritual being, and favor with people, emotional being. Okay, so this is from the Gospel of Luke, talking about Jesus growing up. And it's saying Jesus grew as a whole person, right? He was human through and through. He's also God through and through, but that's the unique thing, okay? So you do see it right there, like the biblical writers understood this holistic understanding of human life, even if they didn't use that terminology. They understood that we have these different parts of us and that God is aware of all these parts, and that God is looking for interaction that involves all these parts. And as we go through this study, hopefully you will start to see how, in fact, all these parts are involved in our connection with God. So, all right, I'll stop for half a minute, see if anybody has any questions or comments before I move on to the next thing. We doing okay? Your mind spinning, some of you? Yeah. So what you need to know is that everything we've done here, I usually take a week to do it at Luther, right? I go much slower with them, right? So you're just getting the high-speed version. That's what you're getting. All right, let's move on to the next thing. And then this gets us really close to where the other group left off. I want to talk about the difference between Christianity as a faith and Christianity as a religion. Because what I want to make clear to the students is that I am interested in teaching them about Christianity, the faith, more than Christianity, the religion. Because when they think of the bad things about Christianity, it is the religion that they're usually interacting with. It's the religion. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, let me ask this question. Which do you think is a better representation of Christianity? This or this? right? Okay. Well, I would say certainly the first one is closer to the original picture of what Jesus did. Okay. Can you kind of see that? Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to talk about for the last few minutes here is what is a religion. And religion, I break down into the 3 R's. And we're going to see if we can figure out what they are. So when you think of a religion, doesn't matter, it doesn't be Christianity or any religion, okay? What are some things that you go, oh yeah, that makes that a religion? Because it has what?
Rituals.
Okay, so there's one. That's the first one. They have rituals. All religions have rituals, right? And by the way, I'm not denigrating rituals because part of my thesis is I've done a lot of reading in ritual theory. And I think there is a reason why rituals are part of our faith experience. And so this is not automatically saying rituals are bad, but it is saying rituals are part of our religiosity. Kate, what else do religions have? Yeah, Beth got it. Rules, right? And of course, when you think of Christianity, what are some of the rules that we have? The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. Now, let's see if you can identify, based on all the stuff I've led up to now, and so you've kind of heard this word already. Let's see if you can identify what the third R is. What do I say? The spiritual part of us is it's seeking what? With God. There you go. Okay. So those are the 3 R's of religion. That's what makes up a religion. But now here's what you need to know is that when we talk about rituals and rules, so here we got 2 images from the Old Testament, right? We got the temple sacrificial system that is prescribed in Leviticus and other places, right? And you've got Moses with the 10 Commandments, right? And these are prescribed by God. That's how the Old Testament puts it, right? So what is the purpose of these rituals and these rules? And I would say the purpose of these rituals and rules, the primary purpose is to make possible or to enhance the relationship between God and humans. And this is true for almost every religious system. But you certainly see it in the Israelites. You see it in Christianity. And I think you can see it in Islam and stuff. The rituals and the rules are there to enhance or make possible the relationship. So we're going to look at a couple of examples of this. So if you brought your Bibles, here's what you can look up. Leviticus 16, verses 18 to 24. Okay? Okay, we're at 8:30. With your permission, I'm going to go 10 more minutes. But if you need to go, then you go. But I want to finish this. I want to finish off the study. But if you need to go, please head out. And this will be online eventually, and you can catch the end of it. But Leviticus. All right. This is describing what happens on the Day of Atonement. This is the ritual. And I want you to identify what happens with the scapegoat. Sixteen verses 18 to 24. So describe the ritual action. What's the first thing that happens? In the first few verses there, you've got blood, putting blood on the altar. Okay? And then you get what with the goat? What happens with the goat? Yeah, but what does the priest do to the goat? Puts his hands on the goat's head, right? And that's a sign of transference. He's putting all the sins of the community on the goat. Then what do they do with the goat? They drive it off. So now I want you to envision this picture, right? you are a member of Israel, right? And you know that as a nation that you have sinned, either corporately or individually. But now all those sins have been placed on the goat, and the goat has taken them away, right? So you can visualize it. You can see the goat going off into the distance, and it's like, there goes our sins. What does the effect of this is basically a scene of forgiveness. So what does that do for the nation? They are made what? Clean or pure. And for the ancient Israelites, it was very important to be pure because you could not come into the presence of God unless you were pure. And so they had all kinds of rules around how to remain pure, right? So that they could be in the presence of God. So when this Day of Atonement ritual happened, it allowed everyone to feel like, well, we can now be in the presence of God. Now this is out in the wilderness still. So they're at the tabernacle, right? And so their understanding is God is present with them there in the tabernacle. That's where they can meet God, right? Now only the priests can go into the inner sanctum, but the rest of them can be around it and see. And they have that sense that our relationship with God is made possible by this ritual, right? Like they can envision that, all right? So that's an example of how the ritual is intended to enhance or make possible the relationship, right? So the point isn't, okay, we got to do this goat thing because it's just something I want you to do, right? Like God isn't giving them an arbitrary command saying, well, do this thing just because I think it's fun. Like God is doing this to enhance the relationship. All right. The rules is simple. 10 Commandments. We can look at the 10 Commandments, and you can find that in a couple of different places. We don't even need to look this up. But think about the 10 Commandments and what they represent. What are they trying to enhance? The first commandments are about our relationship with God, and the other commandments are about our relationship with each other. And so they're there, the commandments are there to enhance our relationship with God and one another. They're not there to, pour cold water on our lives and make life miserable. It's actually the opposite. It's there to make life joyous, fulfilled, purposeful, meaningful, and so on and so forth, right? And so that's the rules and the rituals. So now the problem is when we either focus on the rules or the rituals kind of exclusively rather than on the relationship, then religion can become a problem. And this we see in scriptures. So these are, by the way, we're almost at the end. These are the last two scriptures you're going to look up. So Isaiah 1, 11 to 15. And this is where you'll see that God is identifying through Isaiah that the rituals have become a problem. Who said they liked Isaiah? Somebody said they liked Isaiah. Oh, yeah.
That was me, Jody.
Oh, and Jody, you said you liked it. So Jody, have you got it right there? Have you got that passage?
I'm still pulling it up.
You're still pulling it up. Okay. All right. Has anyone got it handy and they can read it out for us, the rest of us, in their translation? Angela, can you do that?
Sick of your sacrifice. Don't burn me anymore. I don't want your fat ram. I don't want to see the blood from your offering. Who wants your sacrifices and suffering? And meetings are all fraud. I want nothing more to do with them. I hate them all. I can't stand the sight of them. From now on, when you pray with your hands stretched out to heaven, I will not forwards in it. Even though you make many prayers, I will not fear. For your hands are those of murderers. They're covered with blood of your innocent victims. What?
No, that's good. That's good. You get the sense. This is not pussyfooting around here. This is, and so here's the problem. At the time, the Israelites, some of them, are like saying, oh, if we just do this, the ritual stuff, then things are going to be fine. And we're not going to be conquered by Babylon, and God will protect us. And God is like saying, no, you're missing the point. You're not doing the things that you're supposed to in terms of your relationship with me or your relationship with others. And doing all the rituals isn't going to change that, right? So that's an example of that. Now, my favorite is Jesus and his pointing out how the rules can be a problem. So this is another quick story in Mark. So this is the story of Jesus healing a man with a withered hand on the Sabbath. I got this nice picture. Here's the man saying, "Hey, look, my hand, it works." He says, and then Jesus is criticized for it. He's broken the rule. What rule has he broken? The Sabbath rule, according to their understanding of what that meant. So the Pharisees in Jesus' day, the Pharisees had very particular ways of understanding. So they knew you could take this many steps on a Sabbath before it was considered work. And you could do this, but you couldn't do that. And they had all these rules. And Jesus is like, no, you guys are missing the point. You're missing the point. So what does Jesus say? What does Jesus say in response to their criticism? What is his words? Yeah. What is the Sabbath for? Is it lawful to do good or to kill? And so if we can help this man, don't you think that's what we should be doing? Don't you think that brings honor to God? More than saying, well, we're not going to do that. But see, this is the problem. When we get fixated on the rules or fixated on the rituals, we can miss the point. And so there's plenty of examples. So I just read, for example, a criticism from within the Orthodox Church, of the Orthodox Church. So it was an Orthodox priest who said, we have gotten so fixated on the rituals and on the culture that we are missing the point, right? That's just one example. We could come up with lots of them, right? There are pastors that I would criticize in the Lutheran Church who are too fixated on the rituals in terms of they have to be done this way and they have to be done this way, blah, blah, blah. You're missing the point. Same with the rules. I grew up with some rules that didn't even make sense to me, but they were rules. This is what good Christians do. Mom and Dad, you'll maybe remember some of these, right? You don't play cards. That was the one I could never quite figure out. You don't play cards. You don't dance. You don't drink alcohol. And that was like, then what was Jesus doing turning water into wine? Right? But they were rules that it somehow, and I could explain where those rules came from. And there was, when they started, there probably was a purpose for them. But when they became the focus, they missed this. So here's how we're ending. Christian faith is first and foremost about relationship. That's where it always has to come back to. Relationship with God and relationship with one another. And that's what I try and emphasize in my class. And that's what I try and emphasize in my sermons. And that's where we keep coming back to. It's all about relationship. And that's what Jesus was interested in. And that's what we're going to explore. All right, there. Did I do it in 10 minutes? Yes, I did. So thank you for hanging in there. This is where the other group left off. So this is where we'll leave off. And then next week when we come back, we're going to look more at what does this mean about relationship and how does this tie in and so on and so forth. I will officially end it now, but if any of you have any questions or comments, you can ask.
That relationship thing with one another really hit home for those few of us that were in church during COVID.
Yeah.
Once we didn't have that connection. You guys didn't have it preaching.
Yeah.
We didn't have it in the booth because there was only 3 of us in there.
Yeah.
We didn't have that connection, that relationship of anything. Once people started coming back, our hearts
Yeah. I mean, we experience this, and this is good. Well, thank you very much for hanging in there, and we'll see you next week. 4. Well, this is a 4-week session, and then we'll break, and then probably we'll do some more in the new year. Yeah, if people are interested in the history of Christianity, I'll go through that stuff too. Yeah. Thanks for you online. Have a good day.